The Zareth ship hovered in orbit over the desolate planet, a shadow against the stars. Inside the cold, sterile halls of the command vessel, the elite council convened. Their voices, smooth and metallic, resonated with calculated authority. The intelligence reports had been clear: humans, primitive and chaotic, were trespassing in Zareth territory. This affront could not be ignored. "They spread like vermin," said Commander Drenell, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the hologram of a barren planet. "They possess neither the sophistication nor the restraint to warrant tolerance. Their existence disrupts balance." Agreement rippled through the room. The Zareth were conquerors, not negotiators. Their history was a testament to logic and precision, their rule spanning countless worlds. Humans were a trivial species, their technology centuries behind, their methods crude. Yet, the Council's consensus carried no hint of arrogance, only a cold certainty of superiority. A task force was assembled swiftly. The orders were simple: neutralize the human presence, reclaim the planet, and ensure no further incursions. The soldiers, clad in biomechanical armor that shimmered like liquid steel, were deployed to the surface. Each step of their descent was marked by efficiency, their movements synchronized as though they were extensions of a single mind. The planet itself was unremarkable, a wasteland of dust and jagged cliffs. Yet, it held strategic value, a resource-rich outpost in the galactic borderlands. The Zareth scanned the surface, their sensors sweeping for signs of human activity. "Contact," came the report from a squad leader. The holographic display flickered to reveal a lone figure standing amidst the rubble. A human, clad in what could barely be called armor, a patchwork of metals and fabrics that seemed more scavenged than designed. He stood with a relaxed posture, arms crossed, as though completely unfazed by the approaching soldiers. "Pathetic," Drenell muttered, his voice laced with disdain. "Engage." The soldiers advanced, their plasma rifles humming with energy. A volley of shots erupted, bright streaks of blue slicing through the air. The human didn't move. The plasma bolts hit him squarely in the chest. He staggered slightly but didn't fall. Instead, he looked down at his chest, where faint scorch marks marred his armor, and then he laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or the laugh of someone trying to mask fear. It was loud, deep, and genuine, echoing across the barren landscape. The Zareth froze. Laughter wasn't a reaction they were accustomed to, certainly not in the face of plasma fire. The human straightened, rolling his shoulders as though shaking off the attack. "Is that it?" he said, his voice carrying an edge of amusement. "I was expecting more from the galaxy's most advanced species." Confusion rippled through the Zareth ranks. Their weapons were calibrated to vaporize most forms of organic matter. Yet here stood this human, grinning as though he'd just heard a joke. The commander ordered another volley, this time aiming for the head. The shots connected, sending the human sprawling into the dirt. A brief silence followed, the soldiers lowering their weapons slightly. But then, impossibly, the human began to rise. He pushed himself up slowly, dusting off his armor as if brushing away an inconvenience. "Now you've got my attention," he said, his smile widening. A wave of unease swept through the Zareth. The human charged without warning, closing the distance with alarming speed. One soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the human was upon him, wrenching the rifle away and snapping it in half as though it were a twig. The Zareth weren't accustomed to close combat. Their reliance on advanced weaponry left little room for physical confrontation. The human exploited this weakness ruthlessly. He moved like a force of nature, his fists and feet striking with precision and power. The soldiers fell one by one, their armor offering little protection against his relentless assault. The commander, observing from a distance, barked orders into his communicator. "Deploy reinforcements. This anomaly must be contained." As the reinforcements arrived, the human paused, breathing heavily but still grinning. "You're going to need a lot more than that," he said. The Zareth soldiers adjusted their tactics, forming a defensive perimeter. They unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, saturating the area with energy. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring the battlefield. When the dust settled, the human was still standing. His armor was scorched and dented, his face streaked with dirt, but his grin remained. He reached down, picking up a broken piece of a Zareth weapon, and hurled it like a spear. It struck one of the soldiers, piercing their shield and armor with devastating force. Panic began to set in among the Zareth. Their calculated precision was unraveling, their composure giving way to something they hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. The humans' laughter echoed again, louder this time, carrying a note of triumph. "You thought you could just come here and wipe us out? That we'd roll over and die," he said, his voice rising. "You have no idea what you've just started." The Zareth commander, watching the chaos unfold, felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping into his thoughts. It wasn't just fear, it was doubt. "This isn't possible," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "Humans aren't supposed to be like this." The human turned, his gaze locking onto the commander. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and the commander felt a chill run through him. There was something in the human's expression, a fire, a defiance, that was utterly alien to the Zareth way of thinking. Without another word, the human began to walk away, his steps unhurried, his posture unbroken. The Zareth soldiers didn't follow. They stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their confidence shattered. As the human disappeared into the horizon, the commander turned to his remaining troops. "Return to the ship," he ordered. "We need to reassess." For the first time in his long career, he felt the weight of uncertainty. The Zareth had encountered countless species, conquered countless worlds. But this was different. As the soldiers retreated, the humans' parting words echoed in the commander's mind, a haunting reminder of their failure. "You don't want to see what happens when we're serious." Back on the Zareth command vessel, the atmosphere was tense. The soldiers who returned from the surface were silent, their movements mechanical, as if weighed down by something far heavier than their armor. Commander Drenal stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the report streaming across the holographic display. Every line, every statistic confirmed the same impossibility. The human should not have survived. "This anomaly defies all logic," he said, his voice sharp. "What are we missing?" The science division was summoned immediately. Their leader, an elder Zareth named Vrol, approached the central console. Vrol's thin frame belied his centuries of expertise, his mind sharper than the finest blade. "This human," Vrol began, adjusting the settings on the hologram to display a detailed analysis of the encounter, "possesses physical resilience far beyond the parameters of his species. It is unlike anything we have documented." Drenal gestured impatiently. "Speculate less and explain more. Is it genetic? Some form of experimental enhancement?" Vrol hesitated. "Possibly." The surface scans detected elevated energy readings near his location. "It's conceivable he has acquired some external source of power, though its nature remains unclear." Drenal's mandibles twitched. The Zareth did not believe in coincidences. Whatever the source of the human strength, it was likely tied to the planet itself. "Prepare a retrieval unit," he ordered. "If we cannot neutralize the anomaly, we will study it." A second team was assembled, this one composed of elite operatives trained for capture rather than destruction. Their equipment was tailored for maximum restraint, designed to immobilize even the most volatile targets. They descended to the planet with precision, their movements silent and calculated. As they scoured the terrain, the human revealed himself once again, stepping out from behind the remnants of a crumbled structure. His posture was relaxed, his expression almost casual, but there was an intensity in his eyes that unsettled even the most disciplined of the operatives. "So, round two," he asked, his tone light. "Let me guess, you've got new toys to play with." The operatives didn't respond. They raised their weapons in unison, firing nets of electrified fiber designed to incapacitate. The human moved with astonishing speed, dodging the first wave of projectiles with a fluidity that seemed almost choreographed. The nets that did make contact failed to hold him for long. He ripped through them as though they were made of paper, the electric charges sparking harmlessly against his skin. The operatives adjusted their tactics, switching to containment fields that projected barriers of energy. The human paused, his gaze narrowing as he assessed the new threat. He stepped forward, testing the edge of one barrier with his hand. The energy crackled and sparked, forcing him to step back. "Not bad," he said, his voice carrying a hint of grudging respect. "But you still don't get it, do you?" Before the operatives could react, the human moved again, this time with even greater speed. He closed the distance between himself and the nearest soldier, his fist slamming into the containment field generator with enough force to shatter it. The barrier flickered and disappeared, leaving the operatives exposed. One by one, the human dismantled their equipment, his attacks precise and devastating. The elite soldiers, trained to adapt to any situation, found themselves outmatched at every turn. The human's strength was overwhelming, but it was his unpredictability that truly confounded them. "You're too focused on your tech," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You think it'll solve everything for you. But out here, it's not just about what you have. It's about what you're willing to do." The operatives fell back, regrouping as best they could. One of them activated a beacon, signaling for reinforcements. The human noticed the action and smirked. "Calling for backup? Smart," he said. "But you might want to reconsider. I'm just getting started." Before the reinforcements could arrive, the human disappeared into the shadows, leaving the operatives to deal with the aftermath of their failed mission. When the team returned to the command vessel, their report was grim. The human was not only a physical anomaly but also a tactical one. He understood their strategies, adapted to their methods, and exploited their weaknesses with alarming efficiency. Drenel listened to their account in silence, his mind racing. This was no longer a simple mission of eradication. The human represented a challenge to everything the Zareth believed about superiority and control. "We underestimated him," Viroel said, breaking the silence. "This is no ordinary human. If we are to prevail, we must change our approach." Drenel turned to the science officer, his expression unreadable. "Then change it," he said. "I want solutions, not observations." As the council deliberated, the human's words echoed in Drenel's mind, a haunting reminder of the encounter. "It's not about what you have. It's about what you're willing to do." For the first time in his career, Drenel felt a sliver of doubt creep into his thoughts. The Zareth were masters of logic and precision, but this human operated on a different plane, one fueled by something far more primal, something the Zareth did not fully understand. And until they did, victory would remain out of reach. The command vessel was quiet, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional low chatter among the crew. Within the science wing, VROL was immersed in his work. Streams of data flowed across the holographic screens, each one revealing fragments of insight into the human's abilities. "It's not enough," he muttered. His assistants glanced at each other, unsure if they should interrupt. But the elder scientist continued before they could speak. "We're looking at this through the wrong lens. This isn't just biology or technology. It's something more." Commander Drenel entered, his presence commanding attention. "Report," he said curtly. Viroel straightened, though his weariness was evident. "The human's resilience is unprecedented. Our scans detected anomalous energy signatures during his engagements. They appear to originate from his body, but their exact nature is unclear. It's as if his physiology has been augmented by an unknown force." Drenel's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Are you suggesting he has been enhanced artificially?" "Not precisely," VROL replied. "It's possible that this force isn't artificial but environmental. Something about this planet, or perhaps an interaction with it, has altered him. We've seen no evidence of similar anomalies in other humans." Drenel nodded. "Then the answer lies here. On this world." He gestured to the holographic map of the planet. "Focus your efforts. Find the source." Meanwhile, the human was far from idle. He moved through the ruins of his homeworld with purpose, his every action deliberate. He scavenged supplies, reinforced his gear, and mapped out the Zaratha's movements with meticulous precision. His expression was grim, his determination unshaken. "You're persistent," he murmured to himself, glancing at the sky where the Zareth vessels hovered like ominous shadows. But persistence isn't enough. The next encounter was different. The Zareth had adjusted their strategy, deploying drones instead of soldiers. These machines were designed for reconnaissance and containment, their sleek frames bristling with sensors and non-lethal weaponry. They moved in synchronized formations, their precision unmatched by any organic unit. The human watched them from a distance, his gaze calculating. He had dealt with drones before, but these were more advanced, their movements more unpredictable. He waited until they drew closer, then struck with the same ferocity he had displayed against the soldiers. The drones were resilient, their designs meant to withstand significant damage. But the human was relentless, using his surroundings to his advantage. He lured them into narrow corridors, where their mobility was limited, and took them down one by one. As the last drone fell, he picked up its remains, examining the technology with a critical eye. "Interesting," he said. "You're learning. But so am I." The Zareth observed the battle through their surveillance systems. Drenal stood before the display, his expression grim. "He's dismantling our forces, one encounter at a time. And with each engagement he grows stronger." Virol appeared beside him, holding a data pad. "We've identified the energy source," he announced. "It's concentrated in a specific region of the planet, a site that appears to be an ancient structure. This design is unlike anything in our records. It predates even the oldest human civilizations." Drenal turned to him sharply. "And the human?" "He's heading there," Virol replied. "If he reaches the structure, he may gain access to whatever power resides within it." Drenal's mandibles twitched. "Then we must intercept him. Deploy our forces. Full mobilization. He must not reach that site." The human, unaware of the Zareth's discovery, pressed on toward the ancient structure. He moved with a sense of urgency, his instincts telling him that time was running out. The ruins loomed in the distance, their jagged spires piercing the sky like the bones of a long-dead titan. As he approached, he felt the air grow heavier, charged with an energy that made his skin prickle. He stopped for a moment, taking it in. It was unlike anything he had experienced before, a presence that seemed both ancient and alive. "I'm close," he muttered. "Whatever this is, it's the key. It has to be." The Zareth forces descended upon the region, their ships casting long shadows over the terrain. Soldiers and drones spread out, forming a perimeter around the ruins. They moved with precision, their orders clear. The human was to be captured at all costs. But the human was already inside. The structure's interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one filled with strange symbols and machinery that defied explanation. The energy was stronger here, pulsing through the walls like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. He moved carefully, his every step measured. He could feel the Zareth closing in, their presence a growing weight on his mind. But he couldn't turn back now. Not when he was so close. The Zareth entered the structure, their movements cautious. They were wary of traps, both human and alien. Drenal led the charge, his focus unshaken. "Find him," he ordered, "and secure the source." The human reached the central chamber, his breath catching as he took in the sight before him. A massive device stood at the center, its design both alien and familiar. It hummed with energy, its surface glowing faintly. He approached it slowly, his hand outstretched. "Let's see what you've got," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. As his fingers touched the device, the chamber was flooded with light. The Zareth soldiers froze, their weapons raised, as the structure seemed to come alive. The energy pulsed outward, washing over them in waves. Drenal stared in disbelief as the human turned to face them, his eyes glowing with the same light that emanated from the device. He stood taller, his presence more commanding, as if the power of the structure had become a part of him. "You wanted to know what makes us so stubborn," the human said, his voice resonating with a newfound strength. "Now you're about to find out." The room was silent except for the faint hum of energy emanating from the human. The Zareth soldiers, who had entered with confidence and precision, now hesitated. Their once formidable stances faltered under the weight of the power radiating from the figure before them. Drenel stepped forward, his weapon steady but his voice betraying the tension in the air. "You've accessed something you don't understand. Surrender now, and we'll spare you." The human tilted his head slightly, an almost amused expression crossing his face. "You think this is about survival? You don't get it, do you? This is about something much bigger than me or you." The energy around him pulsed again, a tangible force that rippled outward. The walls of the ancient structure seemed to respond, lighting up with symbols and patterns that had lain dormant for centuries. The Zareth soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, their discipline beginning to crack. VROL, watching from a distance through the command vessel's live feed, leaned forward in disbelief. "This energy, this is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's not just a weapon, it's responsive, it's alive." Drenel's voice remained steady, but even he couldn't ignore the growing tension in the air. "Then we neutralize it before it neutralizes us. All units, focus fire." The soldiers obeyed, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts. The room erupted in chaos as beams of light streaked toward the human. But as the first shots reached him, they dissipated harmlessly, absorbed into the shimmering field of energy that now surrounded him. The human stood unmoving, his expression hardening. "You still don't understand," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. "You think brute force is the answer to everything. But this," he gestured to the glowing patterns around him, "isn't something you can control or destroy. It's a reflection of something you've forgotten. Something we humans never did." He raised his hand, and the energy around him coalesced into a blinding beam that shot outward, striking the ground between him and the Zareth forces. The blast was not destructive but overwhelming, a wave of force that sent the soldiers sprawling without inflicting lethal damage. Drenel struggled to his feet, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "What are you trying to prove, human? That you're invincible?" The human's gaze locked onto him, unyielding. "No, that there's more to strength than what you see. You came here thinking you could conquer, that your technology and tactics made you superior. But you overlooked the one thing that's kept us fighting, no matter the odds." Veroel's voice crackled over the comms, directed at Drenel. "Commander, I advise retreat. The energy readings are spiking. If we stay, we risk annihilation." Drenel hesitated, his pride warring with his pragmatism. Finally, he gave a sharp nod. "All units, fall back." The Zareth soldiers began their retreat, moving quickly but carefully as the human watched them go. The energy around him began to subside, the glow fading as the structure's symbols dimmed. He turned away from the departing forces, his focus shifting to the device at the center of the chamber. He placed his hand on its surface once more, closing his eyes. The energy surged again, but this time it was different, calmer, more controlled. He could feel it resonating with him, not as a weapon but as a source of knowledge and understanding. When he opened his eyes, he spoke softly, as if addressing the device itself. "We'll protect this, not just for us but for everyone, because power like this, it belongs to no one and everyone. It's a reminder of what we're all capable of when we stop fighting and start understanding." Outside, the Zareth forces regrouped, their vessels retreating to the skies. From the command vessel, Veroel watched in silence, his mind racing. "He's not just a survivor," he said quietly. "He's a guardian. And this planet, it's more than a battlefield. It's a teacher." Drenel's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Perhaps we underestimated them. Or perhaps we underestimated what it means to truly fight for something." The human stepped out of the ruins, the last traces of energy fading from his form. He stood alone, the barren landscape stretching out before him. Yet, in his solitude, there was no despair, only a quiet determination. He glanced up at the sky where the Zareth ships were retreating, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, the weight of the planet's legacy now resting on his shoulders.